introduce everyone as we always do. And Mayor Harmon, we'll start with you. Just tell everybody your name and where you're from. So.
David Warren, Mayor of Dunedin.
Hey, Scott Ventura.
And you made it here today, right?
I did. I didn't get lost.
Tyler Hughes, Town of Big Stone Gap. Bobby Bloomer, Big Stone Gap.
Julie Bullock, Town of Big Stone Gap. Emily Mayo, Princess, Southwest Virginia. Michelle Workman, Virginia Tourism Corporation.
Ricky Martin, LAC.
Katie Jones, City of North.
John Eldridge, citizen of Big Stone Gap.
Hey y'all, I'm Anna Jim Totten, I'm with the Coach Coalition.
Rick Colley with the West County Chamber. Danny Bernard, I'm a community builder in Dunedin.
Aaron Ornette, Ornette Muldrow Associates. There's a couple more back over here.
Wally Smith, DBA Lines.
I'm Tammy Brown, Director of Parks and Recreation in Big Stone.
Doug Jackson, Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development.
And Andrew Barnes, DBA Lines.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. And Jim, we turn it over to you.
Sweet, yeah. Well, I want to echo the thanks. Those of you standing up, if anybody wants to sit with Jenna in the dreaded center section, feel free. You're more than welcome to. I want to thank you all for coming out. Those of you that participated in the input meetings over the course of this week, I want to echo the thanks there as well. We couldn't make any of these recommendations today if we hadn't heard from you all. I feel like I've met many of you. I've had the privilege of working in the region quite a bit over the past decade or so. We've done work here in Big Stone a decade ago with the downtown plan. Most recently helped to roll out the regional brand for Southwest Virginia and also develop the branding for Clinch River Valley Initiative. So we're pretty familiar with the area. We're also pretty familiar with the overall goals out of this process. But I think one of the things that I'm always very mindful of, and being here this week kind of reminded me of an experience that we had working in Louisiana. We were developing a brand for the Atchafalaya National Heritage Area. And going into this project, I kind of made an assumption that when you have a national heritage area that's built around a river, the connective tissue of the region was going to be that river. And once we got there, we came to realize that because of some issues in the 1940s with the Army Corps of Engineers, and actually what happened is the Corps determined that the Mississippi River was getting ready to change course. And the primary channel was going to overtake the Atchafalaya. And in doing that, it would end up leaving New Orleans dry. So they decided that that couldn't happen. So through a series of levees and dams, they created a system that stabilized the Mississippi. And in doing that, they essentially sacrificed and separated the communities from the river. So the thing that I thought was going to be the connective tissue was actually they all shared a disconnection from the river. So anytime you're working with a region, one of the things that you have to walk in with a very open mind is, what is the benefit to the partners in working together? And one of the things we heard loud and clear is, we've never heard this called the High Knob region before. When we hear High Knob, we think of the tower at the recreation area. So we really needed to be very mindful about the contributions of each of the communities and the ways that together they created a truly dynamic experience and leveraged that dynamic experience to grow the economy. And I think that you'll kind of see how that comes out. So I really tried to focus a lot on organization and on what tactics make sense for taking this plan and moving it forward. So I always like to kind of start up with the who, what, when, why, how, all that stuff. And the who's kind of easy. You all had already kind of gone through that process and landed on this High Knob Regional Initiative. We're going to now call that HKRI, HKRI, because if Clinch can be Kirby, then we're going to be Hickory, just because that's easier than Hookery or whatever. So we're going to be Hickory. So with the High Knob Regional Initiative, now when you see things on the slides, I need you to understand these have not been run by anybody. These are just my suggestions. So don't have anything get you too irritated. But one of the big things that we learned from Curvy is there has to be a long-term goal. And the long-term goal is not actually a linchpin goal. It's not the thing that decides whether you achieve success or failure, but it is that long-term big idea that helps the people to keep coming back together. And in the clinch, this idea of creating this state park was an overall goal. And I think that there's a similar, or should be a similar goal here. And it is the kind of graduation or promotion of the High Knob Recreation Area to achieve the National Recreation Area status. Now, I will say, that is a not only is it a big and hard goal, it's a confusing goal. Because national recreation areas are actually, they exist in two different arms of the federal government, both the NPS and the U.S. Forestry Service. They mean a little bit different things, and then there's also a whole nuance of different, you can be a scenic area, a national scenic area, a national heritage area. There are all these different modifiers. But that overall goal of promoting the status of the destination should be one of those kind of big vision ideas that can be mutually beneficial to the region as a whole. The second, obviously with this being connected with Appalachian Spring, this whole concept of increasing outdoor access, leveraging your natural resources to help grow your economy, but there's absolutely no reason to focus on number two if you don't also simultaneously work on number three, cultivate a business culture of success. You don't want to give away access to natural resources if you're not also preparing yourself to benefit economically. That might sound selfish, but it should not at all. Outdoor resources, you have to plan how you're going to make money off of those visitors. Because if a person spends all day in the woods, there aren't a lot of times for them to give you money. So making sure that you're truly using outdoor recreation to leverage economic growth. 4, stoke local pride. You are in a region that your citizens love their places, but I think it's fair to say the self-esteem is not necessarily that high. They've watched transition in their economies, they watch major industries leave, they've watched job numbers dwindle. They need to be reminded of what is so unbelievably appealing about this region, not only to themselves, but it's really, really good to see outsiders love a place. It helps to remind you why where you live is special. I always give the example of folks with classic cars. Does anybody have a classic car? So I've got a 67 Mustang. This thing is, you would be shocked how much money and effort it takes to keep that one car on the road. And that's why people with classic cars take them to cruise-ins. They need other people to tell them how beautiful their car is. Because without that motivation, you would never be able to justify that continued effort. You need the same feedback loop locally. And then 5th, create regional relationships to leverage the assets. The thing that you have here, you have a collection of different towns and a city. You've got these different communities. They're all at different levels. They're all at different readiness. They're all have different potentials to take advantage of this, but creating a platform that allows each one to buy in and kind of craft their own way is extremely important. What? Now, this is something that's a little bit interesting. It's something that we've been dabbling in, but I think as we move towards this, we want to formalize this concept, and I'm calling it a tourism readiness program. It is being focused on taking advantage of external economies in your community. Because if you're not prepared to convert visitors into external economies, the only way you will be able to grow your economy is by getting more people to move in, which is a much, much harder sales cycle. So how are these communities going to be prepared to take advantage of these new economies and of these new dollars coming in. You want to have a set of standards that are really, those standards need to be determined internally. That was one of the great things that we learned through what was called the Hometowns of the Clinch initiative, is these communities, we kind of threw the idea out. You need to have some way to make sure that the people that are coming to the river are also going to your towns. But then the communities decided what their quality standards were, what the things that they wanted every community to achieve were. So those are going to be a really good foundation in this conversation. But I think we also want to think about the level above us, this larger Southwest Virginia region as well, and a concept that has been thrown out there of base camps. And being able to have communities that are rising up to the top in terms of being tourism-oriented communities and communities that are ready to play that role as host. Why are we doing this? We want to share the High Knob outdoor experience, the perfect combination of outdoor adventure, cultural heritage, friendly interactions, and lifelong memories. The thing that's great about this region is when you look at what each community contributes and add those contributions together, you achieve well-roundedness. And you can sit there and you can say, oh, I mean, I'm in Pennington Gap. I've never considered myself associated with High Knob. But they have Spearhead Trail, Stone Mountain Trail, High Knob's top Stone Mountain. Like there's this logical connection, but we don't need to necessarily be logical. Let's be selfish. Let's be looking at our own benefits. And our own benefits are Pennington Gap provides a huge story for us to be able to tell. Duffield, Natural Tunnel, Daniel Boone Wilderness Trail that goes through Scott County, like amazing assets that when you pull them together, create a great, well-rounded experience. So what we wanted to start there was, we wanted to start with some of the graphics that had already been created from an initiative standpoint, carry those forward a little bit. We created an enhanced overall icon that helps to tie in graphically some of those amenities that we knew that we had throughout this region. Typically, we're not that literal in a lot of the things that we do, but from an organizational standpoint, this gives us a good opportunity to really kind of illustrate, even into our core identity, how every single part of this region has a story to tell. Now, from there, we wanted to start thinking about, at the conclusion of this planning process, how does a plan and a vision turn into implementation? And I had called them committees, and it says committees on the slide, but I really don't mean that. I really mean that there are four different legs to look at. Marketing and pride, regional engagement, economic development, and outdoor access. And in our opinion, virtually any tactic that would come out of this can easily fall into one of those four categories. And we actually generated a whole host of what those tactics might be. Now, don't frantically try to copy it. I'm going to dig into this a good bit later, but this is really the slide to kind of show you that as we're taking those things that we heard over the past 3 days, we were able to turn those into a pretty easy to understand system of organization as we look towards implementation. And I want to share with you a little bit about how our filter system works, because there are a couple on there that I think are, for example, we talked about a certified guide program. We also talked a lot about lodging and the need to enhance lodging opportunities throughout the region. Well, depending on where you go with lodging, lodging could potentially be considered economic development, or it could be considered outdoor access, especially if you're doing something that's cabins or some sort of more temporary outdoor-oriented camping options and things like that. But we put it in economic development. And the reason we did that is because we try to put ourselves into the mindset of what do people think that they do when they volunteer for an outdoor access group versus what do we think people think they do if they volunteer for an economic development group. Does that make sense? So we try to run all those things through a filter. So what I want to do is I want to run through each one of these four legs of this process. So marketing and pride. In the marketing and pride, one of the first things we wanted to do was introduce this regional icon. Now, again, sorry for all the caveats, but I think it's important for you to hear all the different things that we kind of went through in our own minds. You're in a region that has access to a very strong super regional brand that is being supported by full-time staff members with Southwest Virginia. You also have another level above you that is Virginia Coalfields, Bacita, E-Region, and Heart of Appalachia, and Spearhead Trails. And then below you, you have county level identities and individual town and city level identities. There's a lot of stuff out there. So at any point in the process, you have to be very logical when you ask yourself, first of all, who's going to use this? Where's it going to go? Who in the world's ever going to pay for this kind of marketing? We try to be mindful with all those recommendations. The second, the intelligence behind the partnering with Southwest Virginia, Heart of Appalachia, Spearhead Trails, the difference between an external campaign and an internal campaign, merchandising and marketing toolkit, and then the regional justification, understanding why we're all working in together. So I want to kick in and share some of those with you. First of all, the brand values. The things that we heard about with the brand values really, I think the biggest thing that I kept falling into was the collection of assets. And that collection of assets lets every community be a star in some particular category. And that's extremely important. You know, it's one of those things where you think about how people go if they go to a buffet. And, you know, some people go to a buffet and they're going to beeline it to the crab legs. And they're going to pile that plate 6 miles high with crab legs. And then, you know, my kid goes and fills an entire plate up with mashed potatoes. You know, everybody has different values. Everybody has an opportunity to be happy by tapping into a little bit of different doses. So I think that was really, really important for us. But then the other thing that really tied in was just the feeling. The feeling of both being disconnected and unbelievably connected at the same time. For a person from out of this market, when you come here, you truly feel like you're in a different place. But you also feel remarkably welcome. You feel part of something. And, you know, I sit there and I can think back to all these different experiences that I've had with members of the region. And there's a 2-minute window where they're trying to figure out whether you're good people or not. And then the moment that they can figure out that you're good people, it's like they've known you for 50 years. And we wanted to really try to build that into the system. The other thing that we wanted to do from a regional icon standpoint is we wanted to create something that was simple, easy to use, and really kind of leaned a little bit more towards the kind of proactive, active outdoor lifestyle that we want to recruit. So for those of you that have been through one of these with me before, you always know I like to write a brand statement. So I wrote a short one for you. I want to share that with you. From the Tower of Virginia's High Knob to the Natural Tunnel State Park, from our horse park along the Clinch to the Spearhead Trails along the Powell, this region is an amazing collection of all of the best of Southwest Virginia. We are the home of Virginia's official outdoor drama, classic drive-in movies, old-time jam sessions, hundreds of miles of trails, unmatched biodiversity, and a warmth that can only be found nestled in these hills. We are a collection of hometowns in the shadow of High Knob, connected not through identity, but through the similarity of our challenges. We have felt abandoned. We have felt ignored. We have felt overlooked. But opportunity has not. and we proudly have answered. And we've realized we don't just share challenges, but a core set of values. We are loyal, hard-working, and deeply connected to this land. These scenic surroundings are our home and our future. They are the place where we relax. They are the place where we exhale. This is the place that we are most comfortable, and we would like to invite others to experience this amazing feeling. Relax, slow down, get out, and be transformed. Explore the nation's first frontier, the place where the wilderness began, the high point of the Cumberlands. Whether you love riding, hiking, floating, paddling, racing, cruising, or picking, you owe it to yourself to discover this place we call High Knob, Virginia's backyard. So what that does is it allows us to have this opportunity to kind of nest into the messaging that we know is happening in the region above us. It allows us to connect and put on a stage outdoor recreation as well as the cultural amenities that we know have been cultivated throughout the region for nearly 15 years. And we pull it together into this simple icon that becomes a very, very easy graphic to integrate and use. So with anything like this, again, we always like to have something that is versatile. We created many different options of how that might lay out. We leaned directly on colors that we see throughout the region, colors that are used by Southwest Virginia, colors that are used in Big Stone, colors that are used in Norton. So we know that the palette is going to echo and fit in with all the other resources that are already being invested in the region. We also know that there are pre-existing identities that have been created along the way, and those had certain strategic uses but weren't necessarily intended to be that kind of regional icon. But we also have that versatility and that ease of use where you can roll this in as you're trying to create that connectivity throughout the region. You can also easily take this and use it to grow and expand some of the things that are happening above us in that Southwest Virginia region. We created a whole host of new icons that related in everything from, is it Stoneface Rock? Is that how it's? Stoneface Rock, Natural Tunnel. We've got the tower down there in Scott, Wise. You know, these different amenities that allow us to tie in to a pre-existing system, because again, there really aren't the resources to go and just create a new wheel. Like, it already exists. Let's fit in to the regional partners that are already working to tell the story. Let's take advantage of those entities that are out there and bringing people in, whether it's the Heart of Appalachia or whether it's Spearhead Trails, which is the success of introducing people to this part of Southwest Virginia has just been through the roof. I know when we were doing the Southwest Virginia process, we were literally there in the final development stages of Stone Mountain Trail, and being able to see what's happened since its opening and the number of people that have probably discovered Pennington Gap for the first time in that whole region for the first time is really, really exciting to us. Now, I talked about the two different campaigns, the internal and external. Everybody loves to market to the external market. That's the sexy stuff. That's the stuff where it's like, I mean, we heard it in our meetings over Monday and Tuesday. We get a lot of customers from Ohio and Indiana. Well, those are states. It's not easy to market to an entire state. It's also not cheap to do that. The good thing is you have numerous levels of DMOs above you who are doing that heavy lifting. All the way up to VTC, state level tourism, that is bringing those trails into prominency in their marketing of how they're bringing visitors to the state of Virginia. So our argument would be that as this initiative really takes off, allow those organizations to do the heavy lifting. And what that allows you to do as a more localized network focused group is to focus in on cultivating that local pride with an internal campaign. And it really is that invitation for people to discover their own backyard. And the thing is, people have this really, really interesting tendency to assume that they already know everything where they live. There's virtually no motivation to explore in your own community. The moment that you have decided that you can't eat this here, you can't buy this here, you can't get this here, you go ahead and move on and create new retail habits. And when new stores open, you don't stop everything that you're doing and go and explore them. I mean, when you go and talk to a local retailer, every community you go in, you'll hear somebody who'll say, yeah, I had somebody who's lived here for 8 years and said they didn't know I was here, or I've been open for 14 years and I had a local come in for the first time and say, oh, did you just open? Yeah, I opened 14 years ago. So it is unbelievably important to be able to cultivate that spirit of exploration in your own region. And it's also unbelievably important to realize that you are not competing against one another. I'll go into a community and they want a Taco Bell, and the moment that they get a Taco Bell, the community 3 miles down the road is like, we need a Taco Bell. No, you really don't. You know, being able to realize what's good for everybody. So I created a series of ads that were maybe a little bit funny. Michelle seems to at least be slightly amused. This says, we made looking at a bathtub interesting. Find what you're looking for at the Gap. So again, kind of playing off of this kind of external, internal messaging where it's kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think that that's a really good spirit to have. Feeling trapped, you could escape to the knob. You know, again, taking that and showing the region itself in a slightly more savvy way, that's really important. People aren't used to seeing themselves that way, so showing that stuff off. Here, a true American classic at Lay's. You know, again, just finding those easy ways to make clever connections to one another. Creating that marketing and merchandising toolkit. You know, we learned that it's the GW Jeff. So, you know, being able to create a whole platform for merchandising, being able to give an opportunity for consumers to connect with the identity. And that's not just the high knob identity, that's the communities all the way down. One of the great things that we've seen is, you know, we've got a business right over in Norton that has partnered with Southwest Virginia, and in what, a couple weeks, you said, are going to be launching the new merchandise line for the region. So literally, you have an expert in the region that knows exactly what we're talking about here. So being able to create the kind of products that people want. Typically, when you ask the average citizen in a community, the only things that they have that connect them to their local community are either a high school t-shirt or what we call car wash shirts. The shirts that have like 8,000 logos on the back, and they're so ugly that you only wear them when you paint or cut the grass. So being able to have marketing and kind of fashion-oriented items are extremely important for that connection with your local citizens. Now from there, we move into regional engagement. Regional engagement is really focusing in on leveraging those connections between the different entities throughout this region. One thing that we talk about, and this is very, very simple, but being able to create platforms that allow easy communication. Whether we're communicating through like businesses throughout the region, whether we're bringing in the DMOs or communities, being able to just have easy ways. I mean, we sat there and met with business owners and they felt a little bit lost. They didn't know when things were going on. So you don't have to go and create huge solutions. Find the easy answer and start to use that technology. Everybody wants to create a website. And what ends up happening is these groups and initiatives create new websites and they look really, really great. Or maybe they get a grant and they pay a bunch of money for somebody to create this website. And then 6 months down the road, the grant is exhausted, and the volunteers are tired, and the information's out of date, and the website becomes useless. And then somebody loses the password, and then nobody can get into it, and then it becomes like an archived MySpace of your life in 1997. And then it actually starts to work against you because it becomes antiquated. So one of the things that I strongly recommend, I feel like our consumers have become very, very savvy at getting information. There's no reason for us to create a consumer-oriented website on this high knob level. I do think that there's a benefit for us to use the web platform to make sure that there's internal communication amongst the partners. And it does seem to make sense based off some of the things that we've heard about what's happening on the Southwest Virginia level. There might be an opportunity that we can partner with their partner level website to meet those things. Now, we can go ahead and do a couple of things just for longevity's sake. We went ahead and we secured a domain for your backyard. I don't know what it is anymore. I don't know that it's for anything. But we find a relatively simple domain that makes sense. So I'm going to see some sort of website turning huge project and all exhausting volunteers and exhausting finances. Now, communication strategy. One of the biggest things that these organizations do is they come together and they literally burn people out by having them sit around the table in an 8-hour session creating a mission statement. And then the mission statement goes on the really nice website, and then we're kind of done. So I created this thing that it's an organizational Mad Lib. And literally, in a nice little 3-minute exercise, you as a group can sit down with this organizational Mad Lib and you can land on that 2-sentence elevator speech. Now, this is an important exercise. I say it kind of jokingly. I understand the value of mission statements and vision statements. They are very, very important to make sure that there's clarity. But they're also internal communication. This really gives us an opportunity to clearly tell people, why in the world are we doing this? Why are we coming to these meetings? Why are we putting this effort in? But then from there, we also created a series of 5 different worksheets for you that are focused in on what we think are the 5 primary target audiences that this organization would be communicating to. And it simply works you through a very simple exercise of first starting off with the why. This particular one is donors. So as this master plan is completed and this vision for this region is adopted, that first question is, why would someone donate to this effort? Why would they give resources or give to implementing this? And you do the why, then you do the how, then you do the what, identify your goal, identify who your target audience might look like for that particular one, and then any metrics that you might use for that. And you do that for 5 different target audiences: government, donors, volunteers, public, and owners. The government one is a very, very important one because I think one of the biggest things that we still fight with in 2018 is the fact that many elected officials do not see tourism as economic development. There are a lot of people that are firmly planted that industrial recruitment is the only valid economic development. So being able to create a good communication channel that has metrics that can measure your effectiveness. We have found that this exercise is hugely beneficial to these organizations and helps to really springboard you to being able to jump off and start to effectively communicate. Now, something else that's a little interesting, things that are maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we would think were clever. How many of you have heard of parklets? Couple, yeah. Everybody, I know you all know about parklets. Parklets are a simple concept. You take a parking space and you turn it into a park. It might seem silly. It might seem, if you're from kind of a different mindset. No, we need that parking space because, somebody needs to park there. There's this event called Parking Day. And on Parking Day, what they actually do is they go through and they, for one day, turn a parking space into a temporary park. So these are a couple examples. One turned it into a little canoe ride, a chess set, and even setting up park benches and those kind of things. Placemaking is enhancing the relationship between people and their place. And for a very long time, I think a lot of people considered this to be fluff. And now they've started to watch that employees are making different decisions. People are deciding where they want to live, and then they're deciding what they're going to do to support themselves. We keep hearing about millennials, and strangely, millennials, I think, have turned into like a 38-year, time span, because essentially anyone who's not a baby boomer is now a millennial. That's not exactly true, but I think the thing that we truly understand is placemaking is economic development, and you have to educate your localities. This organization is not going to be focused on doing a tremendous amount of placemaking. That happens at that local level, but informing and really building the value around it is extremely important. We heard a ton about cleanliness. If you're going to invite people into your community, you want to make sure that the experience that they have is nice. And we've found that over time, there are a lot of people out there that want to have a clean property. They just feel overwhelmed by it. So community cleanups, being able to organize free-to-use dumpsters, things like that. There are a lot of different tactics that you can have, but we just call it Backyard Proud. And it's that whole initiative at looking at the relationship between pride and cleanliness and being able to bring that into that overall brand. Something else that we're horrible at is celebrating. I absolutely love it's Rally, right? The Opportunity Southwest Virginia Rally grants, and the Y in Rally stands for yay. And because they always preach that at the end of a process, you have to celebrate. And that celebration is very, very important. This idea of this backyard party is just the reinforcement of the importance of sharing on some sort of similar platform all the different things that are going on. We had a meeting yesterday with merchants. We had a merchant from Norton who literally was having a ribbon cutting that day for their business. And being able to make sure that you're starting to connect the dots between all the positive steps forward throughout the region, it's very, very easy for locals to miss all the progress that's happened. Aaron and I have both said this all week long. We have the privilege of seeing what's happening in the community, where we come back and, we're with you, and then we leave, and we come back 2 years later, and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what you've done. While the locals say, nah, nothing's happening. So being able to make sure you have those series of celebrations. Different promotions that focus in on helping businesses to be more successful. You can do things when you're in a region that you can't do when you're a singular market. So one of the things that you might want to accomplish in a region is a region-wide extended hours campaign, where maybe one day a month, you decide to try to get all these local businesses throughout the entire region to stay open to the same time. Now, we've included in that a guide for how to do that, because extended hours campaigns are not fun and they're not fast. And if you've ever worked with a retailer or know a retailer, this is exactly how it goes down. You say, we're going to stay open late for 2 hours extra the third Thursday of every month. And then on the third month, they say, nobody's coming to this, so I'm not going to do it anymore. So literally in 6 hours of effort, they're frustrated that retail habits have not been changed, and they throw in the towel. So typically what we do with extended hours campaigns is we set that expectation. This is a 3-year process. In year 1, we're asking for 2 hours a month, a year-long total of 24-hour contribution to extending the hours. And then you kind of measure your attendance and you adjust accordingly. And the goal would be, hopefully, that at the end of 3 years, you could explore whether staying open every Thursday night makes sense. The business has to have customers come in to warrant being open, but they have to be open to have customers come in. So it's a very slow incremental process, but it's a very important tactic. Then from there, we look at economic development. With the economic development, this is where that rubber really hits the road. One of the big things that we heard a lot about was the guide program, certified guides. We can't point people to guides. I completely understand the importance of this. I also understand the complexity of this. So I wish I had a better answer, but the big thing that I want to say is I think that it is extremely important in a region that is trying to leverage outdoor recreation for economic growth that you all look at potential solutions that connect customers to experts. That might be done on a larger level with an infrastructure that happens on Southwest Virginia level. It might be a shared set of criteria that get adopted throughout the entire region, or it might be a problem that gets solved by the private sector. There are a couple of different models out there that are starting to look at different ways that you can connect people to guides using mobile apps. So it might be that this is a problem that gets solved by the private sector. We heard a lot of talk about incentives. Now, we had a meeting where we went through and we were talking with different business owners, talking about different things, and there's this interesting dynamic where it actually seems like there's a good number of resources. There's a lot of effort that's been put into helping people who want to start businesses. There are even resources and finances that can be made available. There's still issues with lending to small businesses, lending to upstarts. The overall, let's say the temperature, the business community doesn't feel supported by the financial community. But we need to make sure that we're consolidating access to those incentives and we make it really, really easy for someone who's interested in taking a risk to see all the opportunities that are available to them. I think that is a very definite partnership with Opportunity Southwest Virginia. That's what they're focused in on. We do not need to replicate that, but we need to make sure that that relationship is one that's important and kind of focused in on moving forward. Next, a regional business wish list. Every community in the region probably wants a brewery or wants a bike shop or wants a this or wants a that. Those things might not be reasonable to expect. Your market probably is going to bear out that you can't support all those different opportunities based off your market size. And the worst thing that you can have happen is too many duplicate business types starting up simultaneously and causing multiple failures, which continue on this mindset that, oh, well, the region's not ready to grow. Well, you quickly went from being undersaturated to oversaturated with no coordination in your efforts. So being able to use some of the market data that Aaron has been working on to help to create this region-wide wish list. The other thing that this does is this will help to reduce community-to-community competition and will also help to guide, enhance, and awareness of new businesses opening, hopefully creating and cultivating more of an automatic customer base with that region-wide business growth. Next, this lodging program, going through and using some of these sharing platforms like HomeAway and Airbnb to create lodging solutions. this makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of regions out there that are doing things like startup guides for, how to manage having multiple properties. And this also is a huge private sector opportunity for Airbnb management. So being able to look at those different opportunities, not just from an organization side, but private sector side for business growth. I'm calling this the High Knob Welcome. Hospitality training. I'm going to be really blunt with you all. I think a lot of people talk about hospitality training, and then I think that at the end of the day, it's very, very difficult to deliver on. The moment that you train someone in a minimum wage, hospitality-oriented job, they find a different job and they go on. So you've exhausted resources and then you have churn. I wanted to share a couple things with you. I think Abingdon is a really good case study for us. They've done some pretty interesting things. One of the things that they looked at is they looked at things like your readiness for tour buses. So it starts to go through and look at different amenities and experiences you might have to have. They also launched an online customer service training curriculum. And they had a series of shared incentives that they would share back to the businesses if the businesses went through and made sure that their employees were certified through this relatively quick web course once a year. It really was focused on knowing the other businesses in the region and knowing that kind of typical mindset of being concerned about the customer and them having a good experience. If you've ever participated in one of the VTC trainings that they had done for a while, we call it the pickle training, and you'll know that it's kind of scary how revolutionary it is for some of these people to hear that you should put the customer first. So being able to have some sort of access to it, but also understand this is a hard one. This is not something that people have just figured out and this is how you do it. So use your creativity and find a solution that really makes sense for this region. Now, funding and risk mitigation, this ties into some of the things that we heard with lending and everything. I'm pretty excited I was excited to read that Opportunity Southwest Virginia has teamed up with Kiva. Kiva is a very interesting funding platform that allows people to become lenders and then offers 0% interest loans to people in rural areas all throughout the globe, really. And there is a whole area where you can go in and you can look just at opportunities to invest in the United States. And it looks like there are going to be, 5 projects that we're going to see launched out of this region in the next month on Kiva. So that's going to be an interesting platform for us. One of the big things that we always hear is we hear that banks don't want to lend any money, but then the business owners also don't necessarily want to do the due diligence to make sure that they actually know what they're asking for and why they're asking for it. So hopefully through some of the diversity in lending options and an increased awareness of market data through the studies that are going to come out, we're going to be able to better arm entrepreneurs for that lending process. This is one of the things that we're going to throw over to Wally at UVA Wise. Since he's representing UVA Wise, he's going to get a lot of work out of the meeting. Found a really, really great program out of Weber State. They partnered up with Camping World, and they offered an outdoor entrepreneur challenge. The interesting thing about this is they offered the challenge outside of their own institution. So they had participants from about 8 different universities all throughout the country. The top prize got $30,000 to start up their business. So they did a $30,000 prize, a $7,500 prize, and a $5,000 prize. Creating that connection between outdoor recreation and entrepreneurialism, I think, is really, really important. And I think our institutions of higher education really create that platform for tomorrow's entrepreneurs. So making sure that we're making the connection between outdoors and business opportunity, I think, is really important. So I'm calling that Venture Up. And it gives us that opportunity to connect into the overall region. One of the ideas that came to me as we were listening over the course of the past couple of days, we know that escape rooms are very, very popular, but when you're a region that has such rich outdoor recreation, what if you tried to take an escape room and put it outdoors? Well, I was convinced that I had a groundbreaking idea. It has been done before, but right now there are only 4 outdoor escape rooms in the United States. The closest one is in Atlanta, and then all the other 3 are on the West Coast. So I see that as confirmation that it's a decent idea, and it's probably an idea that's on the 2nd revision of that movement. So it might be a good opportunity, again, for that private sector. The next thing is what I'm calling Pitch. It's a pop-up lodging program. So anybody that's heard about pop-up retail programs, this is focused in on pop-up lodging solutions. And it is anything from, if you're familiar with the Sylvan Sport Go trailer that's made down in Brevard, North Carolina, yurts, teepees, Shasta trailers, Airstreams, any of those things, being able to create a lodging infrastructure that could potentially be mobile, that could potentially be shared through multiple communities. You have this opportunity to reinforce your outdoor recreation brand while also creating an economic solution to a lodging problem that if you are leaning on traditional lodging, the only thing that you will be able to do is market growth. So you've got to have stopgap solutions, and creative stopgap solutions that fit into your brand are kind of a cool way to do that. Something else that we heard about coming out of UVA-Wise is a co-op program called Nest. Now, one of the big things that I want to suggest is I would love to see Nest become a region-wide, multiple-site co-working network. So those of us that are Nest members could have a home base out of Norton, and then maybe they're going and they're biking one day and they spend the morning doing work out of Pennington Gap. Small spaces, easy to access, rooms that maybe have availability sometime. We even talked about this room potentially could be used sometime and create revenue. So I think it's a great idea coming out of UVA-Wise, but figuring out ways that it can truly make a more regional impact with co-working space. I think it was Emily yesterday, or was it Emily or Michelle that talked about the tourism business zones and the ability, that's not necessarily the most graphic and visual, but from a policy side of things makes a ton of sense. So being able to go through and take that and run with it, being able to create incentives essentially that allow businesses to have an edge. And then finally wrap it around the corner with outdoor access. So again, that overarching goal of trying to transition High Knob into High Knob National Recreation Area. See what I did there with that forestry shield? Everybody likes that, right? Again, I know that that's a huge challenge. I throw it up there as a slide and kind of make it seem easy, but I think that you have a really interesting asset. You're close to one of the few national recreation areas on the East Coast. There might be some challenges there, but I do think that it's a worthy organizational goal. Now, there's some things that HKRI's doing right now. They're already going out there, whether it's Emily and Michelle, whether it's volunteers from throughout the region, but the mapping and the asset inventories, the asset mappings, the photos of these, this is going to start to build a really rich collection of information. And to kind of go into something that Bobby was asking about on Tuesday, we were talking about mapping. Why is all this stuff not in the same place? Like, why have so many people worked so hard to have rich data, but then it's spread all over creation so it's never in the same place so that you can make it easy? Like, why can't I have a map and just say fishing access or boating access or trailheads? So the initiative has already done some really nice things in terms of pulling together some of those pre-existing data sets. So I think moving towards that direction is something that people understand and believe in. Having these engaged user groups that are adopting values that are shared throughout the region. I know there's been a lot of talk with Leave No Trace, so I think you all are kind of walking down that road, and it makes a lot of sense. Something else that I saw that I thought was a cool idea, and knowing that you've got a city in the region that has a trails, what's your trail coordinator? Trail coordinator. And then looking at what some other regions throughout the country have done, and the Pacific Coast Trail has a team of people that tend the trails, and they're called trail gorillas. I have no clue why, they just thought it was fun. So we decided to have the trail boogers, and you know, just having this opportunity to be able to create a core of volunteers that are a little bit more, I'm not going to say dependable, but educated in terms of tactics. You know, we heard a lot about how you'll have folks that come down on alternative spring breaks, and then they'll get one day to do, you know, trail work and that kind of stuff. And it's like, you almost wonder by the end of the day, how much work did you actually get out of this big group of people, where if you have this core of volunteers who know what they're doing and can really be set to task, this lays a groundwork for something that I think is actually even more important. I don't think most people question the validity of trail creation anymore. I think most people seem to get it. We seem to see it happening in most communities. The problem is they're failing to see the value in connectivity. So they're picking low-hanging fruit, and they're doing whatever trail they can accomplish, and then you end up having a 1.2 mile node there, and you have a 2.6 there. And I think once you create a core group of volunteers, that core group of volunteers is going to help to drive a region-wide trail plan to make sure that you can create an amenity that truly, truly is an international draw. We know that people like this kind of surroundings, and when you pull together and connect those trail systems, you would have something like no one. So I think that's pretty exciting, and again, it's ground level, but makes a lot of sense. Again, tying back over to Wally, UVA-wise, I cannot find anywhere in the country that has a trail management major. Yet, you have communities all over the country that are building trails, designing trails, working through easement processes. We just had a bill passed in Virginia that changes the whole relationship between trails and private property liability, which is going to be huge for the trail system and trail growth. So wouldn't it be amazing if UVA-wise stepped to the table and became the first university to offer a trail management major? I mean, there are universities all through the South that offer golf course management courses and golf course maintenance and that kind of thing. This is, and I made a joke yesterday when I said it. It's almost one of those things where it's like, I don't care if only 2 people take it. It still helps to reinforce the value and quality of assets that you have in this region. We always talk about what we call the Corvette strategy. Chevrolet does not make Corvettes to sell Corvettes. They make Corvettes to sell Cobalts or Cavaliers or, you know, whatever those Impalas. You do the thing that gets you attention, and then you draw people in with that attention. Emory and Henry has a semester of trail where you can spend a semester hiking the AT. A big number of people don't really do that. You know, there might be 1 or 2 students a semester that are taking advantage of that program, but they market it because what that program does is that says we're a university that's on the AT. And if you love outdoors, you should consider coming to school here. So some really, really cool dynamics that go on there. And then there are also some really interesting things happening in the private sector with the sharing economy. I kept talking this week about, wouldn't it be cool if we could create the solution, essentially the Uber for outdoors? If you're looking for bike shuttles, if you're looking for kayak shuttles, if you own a canoe that sits on a rack for the majority of the time and somebody comes to the region and wants to borrow it. This is one example of kind of an early leader in that. It's called Sacred Rides. And this is connecting riders with guides. And it's an interesting model for us to start to look at. So, through all this, I think what you start to see is a series of different messages and programs. They all very much connect to what's happening in the region, happening on local levels, happening on larger regional levels, but directly targeted at being able to set up economic growth from better access to outdoor recreation. So with that, I literally have been talking for 1 hour on the dot, according to the recorder. So I'd love to open it up for your initial thoughts. I mean, obviously everything you've seen, I kind of created since midday yesterday. So this is kind of that first swipe at trying to get my arms wrapped around all the things that we're hearing the organizations talk about and the different groups want to see achieved. But I'd love to hear what your initial thoughts are. Gut reaction. Thank you. All right, we're done.
I have a couple comments about particular items in there. You're talking about the hospitality training someone and then moves on. Well, if it's stay in the region, then that's
right.
An example I ran across recently down in Bristol. There's a number of new breweries down there. Higher end breweries down there is Studio Brew. The owner of that's a very forward-thinking guy. So I walk in there, and there's this wall next to the bar with these certificates. Certification created for people who know about beer.
Oh, okay.
So if you're a server and you're trying to, and this is, he brews expensive high-end beer.
Right.
So he wants knowledgeable people to sell that beer. Gives his employees, as they come on board, the opportunity to go through that training. Cool. His organization is handled by a certification organization outside of his.
Right.
And if they pass, he pays for it.
Sweet.
He has trained 100 people. He doesn't have 100 people working for him.
Right.
Those people are moving out to other places. Okay. So
right.
To have people that are trained in something.
Great point. Great point. Absolutely.
Was there any thought, I'm sure there were, we have the Wilderness Road, Fincastle Highway, all of that was heading toward Cumberland Gap. Activity with Cumberland Gap National Park, which gets 2 million visitors.
Right.
As a Cumberland destination, a knob of the Cumberlands.
Right. So let me see if I can answer in the most diplomatic way possible. I mean, one of the things that I knew as I was looking at the Appalachian Spring Initiative and the 8 identified anchor areas. One of those anchor areas is Daniel Boone's Wilderness Road. So in theory, when you look at all the processes and infrastructure and organization that we're seeing going on here in High Knob, I forecast a similar kind of capacity building effort that happens in that region. And that region is going to end up having overlap, just like Dungannon is both part of Clinch River Valley and part of High Knob. So I think that there's definitely value to it. I mean, if it was part of the region, I could make it super easy to see where continuing down that way makes a lot of sense. But I think what we'll end up seeing is we'll end up seeing some of that sub-regional overlap between Wilderness Road and High Knob. If that's not the right answer, Emily, I'd love for.
Well, I think another place for that is the destination center to say, this is the high knob of the Cumberland Mountains.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think there's like.
Oh, I got you. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, and to his point, those anchor areas are kind of loose ended. A lot of overlap between different communities, but yes, I think the destination.
Right.
In both destination centers that are.
And it was in the brand statement. What? Yeah, I definitely tried to incorporate it in there because I do think that's an important factor, and it was something that we didn't actually know until we were here this week, that it was the highest point in the Cumberland. So being able to tell that, I think, is interesting. Other thoughts or questions?
In regards to the national record,
Yep.
that's gonna be a new concept to some people.
Well, so here's the thing that's weird. The MPS hasn't taken any new national recreation areas in 9 years. So their last that they pulled in were 09. The Forestry Service, and I think I'm saying this right. I think that the majority of the Forestry Service national recreation areas, MPS ones are around watersheds. Is that right? Does that sound right? I dug into it a little bit. I will say, because there is this designation that is shared by these two different entities and they're completely different, it was really difficult for me to get my arms wrapped around what the process looks like. I did see some areas that are listed as national recreation areas that seem similar to High Knob. But then figuring out, are they an MPS NRA or are they a Forestry Service NRA? And there was one collection that was very much around watersheds, and there was one group that was very much around urban forestry centers. So obviously you're neither of those, really. So, but there is definitely a window there, and I think that what I might actually argue, and this is a little bit premature, but I think that there's an interesting and potentially compelling argument about clustering some efforts of National Recreation Area with High Knob and National Heritage Area with Daniel Boone Wilderness Road. And it could make sense if an effort was made jointly for those to go through with the MPS simultaneously. But honestly, to be blunt, it's hitting some points where the differences between the, who knows?
But you're basically asking us to look.
Absolutely.
That's really what the recommendation.
I feel like some sort of additional designation that would help with additional resources and awareness is warranted based off your assets. That makes sense. Yes, ma'am.
Just that, so the Clinch Coalition has been trying to get National Recreation Area status for High Knob for like so many years.
Right.
And we actually just had a meeting with the new forest ranger, the district ranger, to bring that back up.
Gotcha.
So as we introduce her to the region and to our work and the history of the work in this region, we want to remind her that that was a critical component of our goals.
Absolutely.
And as per the last, that is proving to be a very difficult thing on the national level. Yeah, and we've been pushing for it, for since then. And I think that's a great goal. It's certainly one of our goals as an organization. And yet, I think that would take enormous effort on the federal level. This is actually a federal
Right, absolutely.
We can advocate for it here regionally and locally. We can even have our Forest Service like partners advocating for it. And yet it is a federal designation. It will take federal work.
Can't ever
I think we should
forecast.
explore different ways of designating the area outside of that, because that also creates like very specific boundaries about what is or isn't acceptable. Anyway, I think that's interesting. I think we should push it as a region. I would love to see us all working together to make that happen. And while we are working to make that happen, we should probably be figuring out different ways to designate this region.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. And the most pressing issue, Fred, with that, I think, and I might be coming at it from a slightly odd angle, but I would actually say that with the creation of the Exploration Center in Norton, as that's going through a design process, that facility could potentially be a leveraging point, because if you can lower the cost of entry of sorts, so I would say in exploring it, if there are any kinds of standards, I mean, one of the things that we know, Forestry Service is different from Park Service, but Park Service has started to explore whole new definitions of what national parks look like. Delaware just got a new national park that is actually a multi-site collection of historic sites, but is designated a national park, not a national landmark. So there's some interesting kind of partnerships and different creative solutions that I feel like federal agencies are digging into now.
Just one comment on that, and I'd love to see it be a national recreational area. However, just about everybody in here deals with elected boards. And high initiative, they're already a little bit weary of what this is. What do we mean? And they're all on board for creating a tourism economy and trails and use like that. If the first thing that we do is start hammering that it be a national recreational area,
Right.
we're going to have to pull back from boards.
Gotcha.
From my experience.
Right.
I was just gonna say, it's a great goal, and it's just gonna take a huge coordinated effort to get there, because we ran into a lot of pushback when we did the National Heritage Area for the Cricket Road process off the table, because there was so much.
Really?
Yes.
And I mean, you know, it's the same anytime you talk about a national historic district in a community, people push back on that designation, even though that designation is not regulatory in any way, shape, or form.
But
So
they think
it is.
They think you're going to take
Right.
something away from
It's
them,
exactly.
especially right here.
Exactly.
You know, you mentioned that the locals, haven't used High Knob and some of their assets. You know, some of us have. We've hiked and biked and
Right.
all the recreational stuff that you're talking about. But for decades, people have hunted and
Right.
logged and made a living in that mountain.
Right.
Too.
Right.
So that's where that pullback would come from.
One thing to keep in mind too, and it goes back when he introduced that recommendation, it's part of this whole organizational strategy we're talking about with the High Nile Regional Initiative. And if you compare it to the Clinch River Valley, they had this one big idea that really sort of was the flag that carried all of these other efforts that they had there, because they had this end goal and have this end goal that they're working hard on. So whether it's the NRA here or whether it's something else, that's part of the reason why we're making that recommendation, to give the organization a reason to be and a reason for all of you all partners to kind of come together, to work together under that umbrella, to get all of these other things accomplished, including that big idea, whatever that is.
And even if that solution is just coming to the realization that by acquiring the designation, it too significantly changes the use, and it would actually be detrimental to the region. And that very much could be the real answer.
I spoke with the outgoing range
part of me that thinks that somebody just didn't sign a piece of paper, because you know what I mean? It's a weird dynamic, because the Forestry Service owns property and it's a recreation area, but if the difference between a Forestry Service owned recreation area and a national recreation area is the lack of other uses that typically exist in forestry property, then it changes the way that people can use it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one is like, yes and. So I think this is great. This is definitely a conversation that we should all be having as regional partners moving forward. But I do want to hit back on what you were saying, which is that larger goal, the whole point of that is actually not about, let's make a national recreation area and have that be the thing that we do.
Right.
It's about how are we actually creating a unified strategy that creates this concept that is not, like you were saying in the beginning, like this is not inherent, not natural necessarily around here for us to be like, it's this giant thing that we talk about. And that's our big goal.
Right.
If there's a goal, the bigger goal is to be like, this is our unified region, we have it, it exists, whether it's designated as a national recreation area or not, although believe me, I really want it to be one day. But I just don't want us to get lost in it.
Absolutely.
I don't want us to
Great
get
point.
lost in the idea of like national recreation area and we lose the region.
Absolutely.
Also, I'm just gonna be like, parking day, we should just use real parks because that makes more sense here. I understand that it's like a parking lot strategy.
Well, no, what it is, it's a strategy that connects people in the urban spaces and has them want to be in our community. So that's very much the reason why it's important, is because part of that self-esteem that we talked about, people are deriving from those hometowns that they look at and feel like they've watched a decline.
So I think we should just play with it.
Yeah,
That parking day seems like it's something that would fit very well into all the town festivals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of their events is the parking day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
The farmer's market.
My take from this and kind of what I thought of before, and we talked about that a little bit, is that the whole NRA, being able to put High Knob National Recreation Area gives High Knob an identity more than just in this area. It's a national, I mean, anybody, anywhere, if they're looking for places to recreate, they're gonna recreate in some place that has name recognition. And whether it says National Recreation Area on it or something else on it, just being able to identify it as something other than just High Knob something is, and National Recreation Area is one of those things that everybody knows what a National Recreation Area is, even though the Forest Service has no idea what the National Recreation Area is.
Right.
Or our local people here don't. It's something that, it's one of those things, national park, national wildland, national whatever. It's something that gives some name recognition outside our region.
Right. All right, guys, it's 5:25. I want to make sure that we've got an opportunity to have a brief break before we move into the next meeting. But I want to thank all of you. Thanks for your feedback. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for everything that you've given to this process. We'll be sharing all these recommendations directly with the group and evolving and kind of taking it from there. So thank you so much.